The requirements in your lesson plans are for one low level and one high level lesson plan. So with your lesson plans, it doesn't matter to me what grade level or subject area that you choose. When I'm talking about high level or low level, I'm referring to Bloom's taxonomy. So in Bloom's, you've got three kind of low level thinking, which is remember, understand, and apply. And you've got three higher level thinking, analyze, evaluate, and create. And so that's what I'm looking for, is that you create one lesson that falls within that low level spectrum of remember, understand, apply, and one lesson that falls within that higher level of thinking, analyze, evaluate, and create. And the reason I'm pushing you to do one low level, one high level is because getting students to critically think is incredibly important, which happens in those higher levels. And teachers often struggle more with creating lessons that actually get students to critically think than they do creating lessons for them to remember, understand, or apply. So when you start to pick your TEKs, it's going to be really important that you're looking at what type of thinking is happening in those TEKs to be able to choose whether or not that TEK is actually a low level or a high level learning objective. So let's look over at the TEKs. What I'm going to pull is this one because it's one that students commonly choose when they're writing a reading lesson, is summarize the elements of plot development, rising action, turning point, climax, falling action, denouement, in various works of fiction. Okay, so we have to look at what they're doing. They're summarizing the elements. So if we go back to our Bloom's chart, we're going to look through these explanations of what's happening in each one of these levels to find which one best demonstrates the summarizing of plot elements. So if we look at recalling facts, well, they kind of have to do a little bit more than recall facts when they're summarizing, so it's not going to be that one. Explain ideas or concepts, and we see in here they've got the verb describe. So that sounds kind of right because they would have to explain or describe how one thing affects the other. They're using information in new situations. No, we're not asking them to draw connections among ideas. We're not saying how does this story compare to another or justify your position. So in this case, the summarizing of those plot elements would be in this level understand, because they just have to be able to comprehend what they've read and then they're summarizing it back. So that would be an example of a TEK that's in one of these lower level. The higher ones are honestly a little bit harder to find. So we have to look at what thought process might be analyzing or judging or creating, which means you're pulling from lots of different things to create a new scenario. So one of the ones that I found here in the reading is the compare and contrast the structure and viewpoints of two different authors writing for the same purpose, stated claim, and supporting evidence. So that's one of the key ones. When we're asking students to support their claim with evidence, that's leading us more to that higher order thinking. So if we again take this, the two verbs, compare and contrast, we come back to our chart, we see that compare and contrast is not remember. We don't see it in understand. They're not applying. Up here in analyzing, when they're drawing connections, it's asking for them to compare and contrast. So they're looking at two different authors, trying to find those things that are similar and different. So even though they have to understand what they're reading, we're asking them to go a step further and actually analyze and putting some critical thought to what they've read to find the similarities and their differences. So when you're picking out your TEK to try to find one that's low level and high level, it's a process. You have to think through, what am I asking the students to do? What level of thinking is required for them to be able to complete that learning objective or that TEK? So use this chart that's here, or there's lots of other charts available online too, and just make sure you're really wrestling with, what are we asking the kids to do? What is their level of thinking? And I wrote this in the text up here, but just remember, you know, it's kind of implied that in order for you to analyze, let's say, the text, you do have to be able to understand it and recall some of the details. So these other levels of thinking may be present, but what we're looking for is the highest level of thinking that's present within that learning objective or that TEK.